Good afternoon. Welcome to episode 3 of the Construction Trades Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Anderson, and today we will be discussing Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, and specifically how some of the concepts presented in the book can be applied to work in the construction trades. As the title suggests, the book is about taking ownership and responsibility of everything in your world, which is an extremely difficult concept and an extremely difficult undertaking. It requires us to admit our role in the failures, past and present, where we normally choose to blame something or someone else, external circumstances. It really makes us take a look down and see how we're contributing to our own situations and what we can do to improve them, which is the most important part. And so we really need to examine what we need to do to improve. While it's difficult at first, it actually helps us free from victim mentality and allows us greater control over our lives. And while it's a lot easier to just go easier on our egos, just to blame our performance and our relationships on something else, they really do improve when we take an active role in ownership of everything regarding them. So just kind of like a story about how it's easy to immediately think of what else to blame and who else to blame. A couple weeks ago, I had to leave to pick my daughter up from school. I normally don't do that, but my wife's car was in the shop, so I was going to do it. And while I was going, my 2-year-old wanted to come for the ride, and of course she always wants to come for a car ride whenever someone's going. So when I was about to leave, I all of a sudden had to get her ready, get her shoes on and all this. Then by the time I was leaving, I was running a little later than I would have liked to. And of course, then I just missed the first traffic light, and then running even a little later. So I started blaming my wife for not getting my daughter ready, and then blaming the other cars in traffic, in my head. And of course, then really thinking about this, none of this is anyone else's fault. I could have started getting ready a little earlier. If I didn't have time to get my daughter ready, I could have told my wife or asked her to help get her ready. So really, it was stuff I was going through my head, and I also checked it in my head and said, no, getting there, it's my own responsibility to make sure I'm on time. And of course, something we all can relate to. Everyone gets in traffic and is yelling at other drivers while in their car, and but really it's our own fault in situations like that, and it's kind of ridiculous to be thinking it's someone else's. So that being said, let's dive into the book. So both Jocko Willink and Leif Babin are Navy SEALs. They're retired, but still Navy SEALs. And even more importantly, at least for the content of this podcast and this what we're doing, they are both very introspective people. They look at what they're doing, why they're doing it, why things were succeeding, why not, and they're able to apply that knowledge and decode it. And when they returned from combat, they were able to then teach these lessons to business leaders and help business leaders and their team members develop leadership skills that improve their organizations. So this book is divided into 12 chapters and 3 parts, and each chapter teaches a lesson, and it starts with a scenario that they encountered in combat, and then it goes on to another scenario where they encountered the same principle while teaching these concepts to business leaders. And it's very, very well organized how the principles can be applied to either one. They cross pretty much any interpersonal lives and everything, because we're all psychologically the same. And even though the scenarios are different and obviously a lot less stressful and a lot less um, the outcomes of a bad decision in your personal life probably isn't going to be as bad of a decision in a conflict, military conflict um, um, in a hot zone. It's going to be that just compresses for them everything we have to go through in our daily lives into a more intense frame. So they were able to really apply it. So we'll go over these lessons, then we'll go over how a couple of them, I can't really go through all of it, it'll take too much time, but how a few of them will play out in construction trades and how we can use them to improve our lives in the construction industry. So part one is winning the war within, which goes over mental and emotional and interpersonal roles of leadership. So chapter one is the title chapter, Extreme Ownership, and any organization's all responsibility and all the success and failures rests with the leader. The leader must own everything in his or her own world, and there's no one else to blame. The leader must acknowledge mistakes and admit failures and take ownership for them and develop a plan to win. He explains in business, direct responsibility of the leader includes getting people to listen, support, and execute plans, because you can't make people listen or execute. You can only lead them. Chapter 2, this is a chapter I like, and I think is very applicable to construction trades. It is no bad teams, only bad leaders. And it's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. If you set high standards, even if the high standards are only written, if substandard performance is tolerated, it will become the new standard. I believe Leif Babin is the one who discusses this chapter. He goes over a scenario when they're going through Navy SEALs training, when he's training other SEALs after he had been a SEAL. There's a routine where they carry heavy inflatable rubber boats over their heads, and each team has to carry these boats over sand dunes, over obstacles, and around things, bring them on the water, flip them over, flip them back over in the cold sea and the surf, and bring them back and do more obstacle runs. And there was one team that was consistently finishing first, and there's another that was continuously finishing last. So one of the instructors had the idea, let's swap out the leaders of the teams and see how it plays out. And it turns out that the boat that had been coming in last with the new leader all of a sudden started coming in first, and the boat was coming in first started coming in second. But all that was changed was the leaders and the leader's attitude of not the victim mentality of, oh, I have the worst guys in my crew, but change it. How do we get this done? Let's figure out a way to win. And that the mindset changed and helped everyone. And actually, the follow-up to that, the leader who had swapped out of that last boat, he learned the lesson too and became a great Navy SEAL leader as well. But in construction crews, we can't really always pick who we have on our teams. But we have to make the most of it and lead those people as best we can, and really to help them achieve as best as they can. And everyone has high performance within them, and it's our goals as leaders to allow people to let those display. So some of the following concepts will help you do that. The next one is believe. In order for a leader to convince and inspire others to accomplish a mission, that leader must be a true believer in the mission. Even when others doubt and question the amount of risk, a leader must believe in a greater cause. If a leader does not believe in this, he will not be able to take risks and necessary risks that are necessary to achieve, and will not be able to convince others, obviously. So it's important to understand the why yourself and be able to convince others of the why as well. Next one is check the ego. When personal issues become more important than the success of an organization, it will result in failure. We must put our own egos aside and be mindful of the egos of others who may be affected by the plans. Then the next one is cover and move. And this one is great because it's about executing a plan. So this is the start of part two. And it's about part two is about executing plans. Put simply, cover and move is about teamwork and how teams must work together to accomplish a common goal. Broken down into smaller teams, these teams may lose sight of the goal of the larger team and organization and must seek to work together. And I love this one for construction because there's on a construction site or just in trades in general, there's many different companies working together, many different trades, and if you the goal still remains the same for everyone: constructing a building, finishing a project on time, on budget. No one wants to go over budget, and that's the greatest goal. But when teams lose sight of that and focus on their own goals only, to the detriment of other teams, then it becomes a problem, and it becomes a living hell if you go to work every day and all there is fighting between different teams or different trades. And same thing if you're in the office, if you're constantly just fighting with other people who you're supposed to be working with, but you seem like you're working against each other, then your days and weeks become a living hell. Another example of this I was thinking about from my personal life was last year my daughter had a softball game, and it was almost like a scrimmage against a team from another town. And when they get to the game, the coach of the other team says, "You guys forfeit and we win," and it's all because one of the players on my daughter's team wore the wrong jersey. Now, of course, in team sports, both teams have their own agendas to win the game, but they also have the common goal of playing out a game to see who can be the winner. Now, this wasn't like a tournament play where it would make a difference in the final standings. It was a scrimmage, so it was really ridiculous that this guy lost sight of the goal of the two teams to play, have a winner, have a loser, have fun, have learning experiences, and have an outcome. So they ended up playing the game after people convinced him he was being ridiculous. But it's just how some people can lose sight of the common goal for their own agenda. Next thing, make with plans. Simplify. Make plans and missions as simple as possible for people to execute. Break it down into its simplest parts so you and your team can easily achieve each part. Next, prioritize. This kind of goes with the other one once you have different parts, but you want to prioritize each back up. Prioritize. There's another big one for execution. We all have a lot to do, whether in a job site or in the office or in your personal life. You got to think, what can I do first that will make the biggest impact? Or often problems arise, and selecting which problem needs to be addressed first, so it's not going to cascade into larger problems, or what would be a problem that would end all of the problems to the detriment of everything. You want to get rid of that one first. So you really need to plan most important to least important, and just work them down from that way in which way to get them done. Decentralized command. This is a good one, number 8. This is what leadership is all about and what makes it effective. It's how to leverage your time and skills and the time and skills of everyone in your in your world. Um, and human beings, according to the book, are generally not capable of managing more than 6 to 10 people, particularly when things go wrong, and they eventually do. And no senior leader can be expected to manage dozens, no less than hundreds of individuals. Teams must be broken down into manageable elements of 4 to 5 operators. The leader must understand the overall mission, and junior leaders must have authority to make decisions on key tasks. That's a big thing. You can't have responsibility without authority to make decisions. Otherwise, it's just not responsibility. It's fault. Teams with or assigning blame, but that's the key. That the leaders must have authority to make the decisions, and teams within teams must be organized for maximum effectiveness for a particular mission. Each must understand not just what they need to do, but why. Then we jump into part 3, and this is sustaining victory or planning. So part 9 is plan, and plan begins with mission and mission analysis. Leaders must identify clear directives for teams. A broad and ambiguous mission results in lack of focus, ineffective execution, and mission creep. So you'll start doing other things that aren't as important to the mission, but they could be related, but not the main mission. And to accomplish this mission must be clear. To accomplish this mission must be clearly defined and simplified, so it's explicitly clear and focused to achieve the greater strategic vision for which that mission is a part. Again, you don't want to start doing a bunch of mini missions that have nothing to do with the greater strategic vision. So he gives some key tips: analyze and identify and state the intent, identify key personnel, assets and resources, and time frame. Decentralize command, so empower your key leaders below you. Determine course of action. Lean toward the simplest one, obviously. Focus your effort. Continually check plans against emerging info. And conduct a post-operation analysis. That drives us into number 10. Lead up and down the chain of command. A lot of this whole book's been discussing how to lean down the chain of command, which is straightforward, but leading up the chain of command is probably the harder of the two. It's going to force you to confront your superiors. Sometimes may not be comfortable for a lot of people, or most people, but it's important then to give them information and request mission clarity. If you're given unclear plans or ambiguous plans, you're not going to be able to express clear plans to the people who are working for you or with you or on your team. And it's also important to fully understand the why of the mission, which again is important for you and for your team. If you don't know the why and don't believe in the why, then you can express that to your team. But if you don't know it, you need to get the information from your superiors to understand the why. And if you don't understand it, you need to discuss with them what it is you don't understand about it until they can supply you with the proper information. Number 11 is decisiveness. You will have to make, you'll never have enough information to make that you'll feel necessary to make the best decisions. But you need to be able to make a good decision with all the information you have. But not making a decision sometimes can be worse than making a poor decision. So that's why you need to be decisive. You gotta get all the information you can. Once you have that information, then you make a decision and go from there. Discipline equals freedom, and this is under the something dichotomy of leadership, because it's there's two facets of it. having the discipline to make the difficult decisions, and balancing discipline and freedom. So that's to be flexible enough, but knowing that the flexibility you have starts with a foundation of discipline and having a disciplined framework from which to become flexible. So it's a little tricky there. That's the last part of the book. So overall, the very positive opinion about the book. A lot of great lessons from it, and it's well organized. They give many clear examples from, like I said, from leadership in combat and leadership in business, and how you can apply these to your personal life with a variety of stories that demonstrate the principles very well. And while this podcast, I give a review of the book, I highly recommend buying the physical book, ebook, audiobook of Extreme Ownership, listening and reading through it yourself, taking notes. And while the podcast is for me to present to you, the listener, some information about the book, it's also for myself. I'm undertaking this whole journey to become a better presenter and to solidify my learning in a lot of this material. And I also hope to become a better and better presenter of all material each week. So while this presentation still may be a little rough, please continue to check in future weeks, and I promise I will continue to improve each one, and eventually all guests, and so people who really know what they're talking about, not just kidding, or maybe not. But I'll continue to improve and have better presentations, and then also check out our course products at constructiontradeleaders.com. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.